How you doing, everyone? Welcome back. About 3 weeks ago, I did my most popular video that I have ever done. It has nearly 13,000 views, and I am still getting engagement on that video. It's the one about trans people and mass shootings, the one where many people expected something different from what I had actually said. That's a common thread throughout the comments. I expected something completely different. Well, I had a trans woman not really challenge me necessarily in the comments, but somewhat. Alright? She somewhat challenged me. Alright? And basically what she said, because I pointed out that the largest threat as it pertains to shootings is cisgender white men. And statistically, that is absolutely true. In fact, Evel's Hungry is, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is the viewer who mentioned that it is not a white man issue. I mean, it is, but she's also right that no, it's really not, right? Basically, she points out, again, correctly, that it's a societal mental health issue, which is definitely part of it. And, the state of the internet and men having largely been abandoned by a society that, they don't, we really don't understand our place in it, right? Because there's been so much focus on, well, women and the LGBTQ community and, trying to help level the playing field for others, right? So why is it that men feel abandoned? Well, the internet culture is definitely part of it. That's definitely part of it. So, first of all, Evel's Hungry, thank you for that comment and the idea for this video. And I did type out a response, but I didn't. I didn't type out everything that I wanted to say, right? Because as I was typing that response, I got the idea for this video. And, it's been a couple of days since that interaction. So, part of the problem is the fact that white male privilege absolutely does exist. That's part of the problem, right? And that is not to say, before I get the comments about, well, I grew up poor and I'm a white person. You know what? I grew up lower middle class, working class, disadvantaged in a lot of ways. I've been down to the point of being homeless. And I understand the natural inclination to conflate privilege with wealth. I understand that. I also understand the inclination to equate privilege with the idea of not having to struggle. I understand that. In fact, for the longest time, I denied the existence of white privilege or male privilege because of some of the struggles that I've been through and most of the people that I know have been through. Alright? But if we look at just objective facts, it is there. It does exist. For example, right? Two men apply for a job. And one, we're going to say his name is Sean, right? The next guy, his name is LaShawn. Who is more likely to get a call back? Well, LaShawn sounds like a stereotypical black name. It's not to say that he's not a white guy, but Sean, especially if, when you look at the different possible spellings of the name Sean, it could very well be, it's more than likely to be a white guy, one would think, right? Especially if it's the more traditional SEAN spelling, right? Because a lot of times that spelling comes from someone with Irish heritage. But, you know, there's also SHAUN and SHAWN. You know, but if it has a unique spelling, like former Chicago Cubs shortstop from way back in the day, 1980s is when he played for him, Sean Dunston, SHAWON, right? Now that, you know, people might assume that that's a black name, and therefore not give him a call back. Now, Sean Dunston was a black man, but, well, he's still alive. But you wouldn't assume that based on his name necessarily, or you might if you saw the way it was written. Okay, so that's a way in which white privilege exists. But I'm getting off too much in the weeds on white privilege when this is specifically about males, and in particularly white males. All right. Now, men, we are typically paid more than women for the same work. I mean, it's not legal, but it happens. And, you know, same job, same experience, you know, and a man is more likely to be paid more, right? So, white male privilege, it is a thing, right? And this isn't about that specifically, right? Just the fact that it does exist needs to be acknowledged for the sake of this video, right? So, add that privilege, right, to the fact that actions have been taken legally to make the playing field a little bit more level, right? Now, as the saying goes, to the privileged, equality can feel like oppression. So, white men, if you feel oppressed, maybe it's because there is more and more equality, slowly, but it's a slow process, but it's happening. We are getting a little bit more equality, or we have been anyway. We're still nowhere near where we need to be, but, you know, the fact that somebody else has a better opportunity than they did, and now you have to compete just a little bit harder, well, that doesn't mean that you're being oppressed. It means that if you're playing a game of Monopoly, right, and you are allowed to start buying properties and, charging rent on those properties, and you get to collect that $200 for passing go every single time, right from your very first turn. Whereas your opponent has to go around the board several times before they can start buying properties and putting up hotels and houses, and they don't get to collect that $200 for passing go. Well, now the rules are in your favor, are they not? It's not impossible for your opponent to win, but it is extremely unlikely. That person is at very much a disadvantage. But now let's change the rules so that that person can also start buying properties right from the very start. Well, a little bit more even now, isn't it? So you have to be a little bit more strategic. Okay? So, do they have an unfair advantage? No, we have had the unfair advantage. And now that it is starting to become more fair, I mean, it's still not fair yet, but it is becoming more fair, or has become more fair. It can feel like they're stacking the deck against us when they're not. Right? The deck has been stacked against us, and we are unstacking it. Right? Now, let's add that to the idea of toxic masculinity. Okay, toxic masculinity, and I know some people hate that term, and I used to hate it myself because I didn't understand what it was. It is not masculinity is toxic. No, think of it like, in fact, I'm gonna cite a guy who, he personally is no longer on YouTube, but his channel is, his wife runs it now. Beau of the Fifth Column. It is now Belle of the Ranch. It's his wife that runs the channel now, and she does a great job. But a few years ago, Beau of the Fifth Column, Beau brought up the idea of toxic masculinity, and he compared it to spoiled milk. So, when you hear the phrase toxic masculinity, right, why do you assume that it means all masculinity is toxic? It's not. Just like when you hear the phrase spoiled milk, you don't assume that all milk is spoiled. You just assume that, if I say that's a jug of spoiled milk, you're going to avoid that milk, right? You're going to go for this jug over here that is not spoiled. Same concept as it pertains to toxic masculinity. This guy over here is toxic. This guy over here equally as masculine, but not toxic. Actually, I would argue that the non-toxic version is probably more masculine, or at least more secure in his masculinity, right? So, basically, according to the toxic masculinity, you get your guys like your Andrew Tates out there who have this massive internet presence, and then you get some of the least traditionally masculine-looking guys lecturing the rest of us on masculinity, right? Your Tucker Carlsons and your Jesse Waters and Nick Fuentes, and it's just funny to hear them lecture everybody else on what is and is not masculine. Right? Which is not to say that they are not masculine men per se, but they are very toxic. Right? The idea that men somehow need to be the boss, and that women are there to cook. I mean, that their place is in the kitchen. You know what? You stay at home. Your place is in the kitchen, and your job is to cook and to make babies. Right? That's a woman's job, according to the toxic variety of masculinity. Right? The idea that nurturing behavior and empathy are weaknesses, that's part of toxic masculinity. There is nothing weak about being empathetic. There is nothing weak with nurturing your child, for example. Just because I would argue that, women are generally better at the nurturing part of things. That doesn't mean that men can't do it. Actually, we can. We just do it in a different way for the most part. Right? The idea that violence is acceptable is another form of toxic masculinity. I've actually had to. I don't delete comments on my videos, except for one that was very explicitly advocating for violence. Well, actually, I've deleted two individuals' comments. One of them was very specifically advocating for violence. And I'm not going to have that, right? When you are promoting and advocating violence, that's toxic. Add that, to gun culture. Gun culture is another form of toxic masculinity. All right? Which, I have nothing against guns. I own some, right? That doesn't mean that the gun culture has to be what it is. The gun culture does not have to be what it is. Why do we need to make it known that, we have this huge collection of AR-15s or whatnot, right? Why do we have people sending out Christmas cards with the whole family around the tree holding weapons? Why? It's ridiculous. Right? Actual thought is often discouraged. Right? Actual thought is discouraged. Men are supposed to be reactionary, right? Supposedly. Let's not think of solutions in advance, right? Let's not be creative. And any deviation from this type of masculinity means that you're not a real man, right? So, the internet culture, which feeds into the toxic masculinity, and keep in mind, this has been going on long before the internet culture, too, because we were told all the way back in the 1960s, well, most of us weren't told that because most of us weren't born yet, but we were told, starting way back then, with the Civil Rights Act, that, these people getting equality means that they have more rights than we do. Well, no. It means that now they have the same rights that we do. Or even if you want to go back to, you know, the women's suffrage, right? Some of the same arguments were made. You know, and then you've got the right wing that is promoting this idea of masculinity. Okay? Combine that with no ideas to actually move the country forward and to move forward as a society. They want to push us backwards to a time when the white men were the dominant force. Throw in some of the conspiracy theories, you know, the Great White Replacement Theory, which is bogus. You know, nobody is being replaced. You know, more people coming in does not mean, you know, that there are fewer of us. It just means that we're adding. We're adding to the total. Right? The fact that we don't have enough traditionally masculine men speaking up, that's part of the problem as well. You know, the fact that you know, you have some men out there who have a problem with their sons, you know, playing with dolls or wearing the color pink, or like if they're coloring and you know, they color in a rainbow. Well, that doesn't mean that your kid is gay or is going to become gay. In fact, I have a good friend of mine who, by the way, he's a Christian pastor. His son asked for a Ken doll. Okay? And his Ken doll, the boy decided that Ken needed a wife. So they got him a Barbie to go with Ken. Right? This boy has had his hair various different colors. I want to say purple. I think it's been purple and blue. Might have been pink at one point. I don't know. And yet, he is the stereotype of all boy, right? He plays football. He loves the shoot-'em-up video games. You know, but he has these, you know, a couple of things here and there that may not be acceptable by the hyper-masculine or the toxically masculine, right? So, you know, different colors don't mean anything, right? The clothes that your kids wear, it doesn't mean anything, right? So, toxic masculinity is part of the problem. White male privilege is part of the problem. You know, and when we are told over and over and over again that something is being taken from us, when really it's not. It doesn't have to be taken from us to be given to someone else. Right? It's not a zero-sum game. It's not a slice of pie, right? If you take a pie, right, and if I get a slice, and then you get a slice, and then you get a slice, okay, that's 2 fewer slices for me. Okay? When it comes to rights and equal treatment, it's not a pie. You receiving more rights and you receiving more rights doesn't mean less for me. It doesn't mean less for me. And again, the privileged, to the privileged, equality can feel like oppression. White men We are not being oppressed. We're not. All right? And to the extent that we are, it's a class thing. All right? It is not because we're white men. It is because most of us are not billionaires. All right? So, are we being oppressed because we're not billionaires? To a certain extent, yes. But that's everybody. But when you add different racial groups and the LGBTQ community and women and just anybody else, right? They know what oppression actually is. They're the ones who actually face it. Not us, guys. It's not us. All right? We do have privilege. But because we are such a large and vocal group, they need us angry so that they can divide and conquer. That is the entire strategy. Divide and conquer. Don't let them divide us. Don't let them divide us. All right? I'll see you next time.